song was. I love that new song. It is so good. Your voice is just so incredible. Damn, let's give a round of applause to Sam the Yard. Kind of determined. But alright, next up is the Tony Paterniti. And then on deck is Katya. Please welcome Tony to the stage.
Take the mic. I'm gonna actually time this because I have no idea how long this is gonna take. So I'm gonna try and pace it. I usually come in to read poetry or as a singer-songwriter, some song I've written, and something has been blocked in me saying, no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. And I finally realized there is one other thing that I do that I have never done publicly, which is tell stories of things that have happened in my life. And when I was about 16, I kind of hooked onto a very live spiritual wire. And since then, I've got stories like Forrest Gump, you know? I kind of wind up in these extraordinary situations, and you know it's very meaningful, but I don't know what my role is supposed to be. So one of these I call Easter in Havana. I had started working at the UN in 1980, the end of 82, and I got married in 84, and in early 85 I was asked if I'd like to go to Havana to cover a conference. And for an American to go to Havana in 1985 was something amazing. So I said yes, that would be a word processing. And we had to fly through Mexico to Havana, and we arrived on Easter Sunday. Oh, I hope I can do this in 7 minutes. I flew down, my seatmate was a Costa Rican translator, became friends, and he'd been to Havana before, and he gave me a tour on Easter Sunday, walking down the Malecón, they call it. It's the long, winding road that goes along the shore. Went to the Bodeguita del Medio, which is a club that Hemingway used to hang out at. It was lovely. A lot of couples out on Easter Day, but suppressed for Latins, I thought. And I wondered if it was the atmosphere of the government that accounted for that. I went up in the elevator, and the woman who operated asked me where I was from, and I said, the United States. And I said, the enemy. And she said, oh no, not the people. I thought, well, that was good. We had, I'm going to have to cut this so short, sorry.
Come on. Don't worry about it, keep going.
Okay, so the conference was 3 days. I didn't have a lot of work to do, as it turned out. I hung out with my friend from Costa Rica and 2 women who worked in the Spanish word processing. One night at dinner, they pointed out this really gorgeous Cuban woman who was passing by. And I said, you know, it was a newlywed, more or less. And I said, you know, I'm married. And all at once they said together, yo casado, pero no. Which is short for yo casado, pero no incapado. Means I'm married, but I'm not broken. But anyway, on the last evening of the conference, we were told that the Cuban government was going to take us out the next day to the Isle of Youth, which this fellow Costa Rica had been through too, and it had a beach with black sand. So I wore my bathing suit as we got on the bus the next day. We went to the shore, they put us on a hydroplane, which was amazing. But instead of taking us to the beach, they took us to the prison that Castro was kept in under Batista. The American prison made in Illinois. Okay, I got it, American. For lunch, we sat, they had this big buffet under a spreading banyan tree. And someone introduced me to a fellow there from the Cuban government. And he said to me, are you Italian? And I'm 3rd generation Italian. But I was immediately suspicious because people never take me for Italian. They take me for whatever is popular where I am. So I said, yeah. He said, you remind me of a priest I had when I was young. And he was about to say, but I don't believe that anymore. I looked at him, I said, thank you, my son. It's good that you remember me after all these years. Turns out, he was the #3 man in Castro's government. he seemed to have a sense of humor, which his name was Guerra. So anyway, they toured some more. They took us on the bus back to Havana. It was already nightfall, and the foreign minister gets up and says, His Excellency Dr. Fidel Castro Ruiz would like the pleasure of your company for a dinner at the palace tonight. So we wind up rushing to our rooms to change. We get to the palace. There's a receiving line, videotape, cameras. We're all going up and shaking hands with Castro. And he's a tall guy, very tall guy. And as I'm shaking his hand, I'm thinking, if I ever want to run for president, this picture is going to screw me. So the dinner started. Castro mingled. At some point, he lit up a cigar. They handed out Cuban cigars to everybody. He came and he was standing maybe this close and taking questions from people. And I had some good questions, but I thought that if I asked this question, I might not get back to New York. So I didn't ask any questions. And in the back of my mind, many people had the thought, it was in the air, that he might have been connected with John Kennedy's assassination, which he wasn't. But that also crossed my mind, so I just kept it cool. That night, went to reconfirm our tickets with the UN official for the next morning's flight. And he gave me my passport, my UN passport. I didn't say anything. The next day I got to the airport, they said, sorry, there's no room on that flight for you. What do you mean there's no room on the flight? It's booked. Well, this is your airline. They were taking really good care of the UN people. I was one of the few Americans. And me and a few other people could not get on the plane. They took us back to the hotel. This was scary. We talked to some UN officials and other people there, and people promised, but no one could really help us. I went back to my room that night. One man, an Argentine fellow from a non-governmental organization, I don't speak a lot of Spanish, but I understood when he said, "La situación es más grave que tú pensar." The situation is way more serious than you realize. I said, great. Got up to my room and called my friend in Mexico City. I can shorten this at any time.
No,
okay.
keep going.
Okay. So I called my friend in Mexico City. I was going to spend the weekend with him, and he worked for the UN Environment Program. He's a Puerto Rican. He's from Puerto Rico, but works for the UN, lives in Mexico. He said, don't worry, everything will be fine. He said, but if I don't hear from you, call me tomorrow. But if I don't hear from you, I'll call your wife in New York so she can contact the authorities. As soon as he said contact the authorities, the phone call was cut off. Oh, somebody's listening. Now, a few people said that they thought maybe the Cubans thought I was an American agent. It's always possible, right? So that night, there were these 3 prayers I used to say before I went to sleep, out loud. And so they're listening, maybe it'll do them good, you know? And I said these prayers, and then I went into a very spontaneous, out loud prayer, what was on my mind, about how insane it was to have this level of hostility and distrust between the US and Cuba, and how much better it would be for everyone if that would just ease up and people would put their pride away. I'm thinking if Castro's listening, I could really be in trouble for saying that. The next morning, we went back to the airport, and again, we couldn't get on the plane. And they said, but here, call this fellow, he knows about your situation. And it was the guy who said I reminded him of his priest. And he said, well, you know, we would like to help you, but really it's up to UNDP, this UN program. And I felt like saying, it's your damn airline. All you have to do is pick up the phone. Well, for whatever reason, he picked up the phone. And after a while, as I was almost giving up, someone ran over and said, you can get on. So I get on the plane, Havana Airlines to Mexico City. I'm sitting next to a woman who works for the Organización para la Independencia de Puerto Rico, the Organization for Puerto Rican Independence. And so we started talking. I said, but the Puerto Ricans want independence? And she said, well, no, but we have to educate them. I said, okay. And they came around and they were selling Havana Club rum. And the rum in Cuba was so good. And it was $5 a bottle. And I took out my $10 traveler's check, and they wouldn't accept it. So this woman from the organization from Puerto Rico loaned me $10, and I got these 2 bottles of rum. I land in Mexico City. I go up to the desk to reconfirm my flight to New York. They look puzzled. They say, sorry, you don't have a flight back to New York. Yeah, I do. Here it is. They said, oh, no, you had a flight, but Cubana called and said you wouldn't be going back to New York. And they canceled the flight. Just at that moment, someone walked up, canceled their flight, and I was able to get that one. It turned out the U.S., this was under Reagan, there was a Cuban official who worked at the UN who was part of this conference, and the U.S. was giving him a hard time about getting back to New York. And so they basically said, fine, you're going to give a Cuban a hard time, we're going to give an American a hard time. So, anyway, now I'm out. I spent 2 days with my friend. He took me to the pyramids, and I had a wonderful time in Mexico City. Got back to New York, wrote out a check in the car, I put it in a card to send to this woman with her $10. I said, thanks for the loan. The Havana Club was delicious. A week later, I get home. The envelope is in my mailbox with the top slit, the corner clipped, and the check still inside. And they didn't have to say. Clearly, either the FBI or the CIA were watching this organization, and they were telling me, we're watching these people, don't have anything to do with them, here's your money back. So she never got her $10. The interesting thing, though, and this is actually towards the end, this is about near the end of the story. Not long after I got back to New York, now remember that prayer that I had spoken ad-lib, kind of, knowing that they might be listening, thinking I was an agent. Not long after I got back, Castro started doing making all these really nice gestures to the U.S. And relations started actually to thaw. And it was like every week there was some other thing he generously gave or he conceded on some issue. And it went on for 2 or 3 months until Reagan, who was really radically separative, instituted something called Radio Marti, which was like Radio Free Europe, broadcasted to Havana to tell everyone to rise up against Castro, and it ended. But all in all, it was a wonderful adventure and a story. I've loved to tell people one-to-one, and this is the first chance I've had to share one of my Forrest Gump stories.
Story hour with Tony, everybody! Yeah! Like, I was literally imagining, like, they're putting, like, a big carpet here, and, like, we all lay down and listen to records and hear stories. It'd be kind of fun. That's an idea, guys. Alright, next up is Katya. And I would love for everybody to stay after Katya because we're going to take a group photo.